Breaking news in the mystery disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has just confirmed shocking new information about the ransom notes that have haunted this case. For the first time, we're seeing the actual ransom notes from law enforcement, plus a chilling development that police seem to believe this was no spur-of-the-moment crime. The suspect may have stalked the home, studied the scene, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. This is a breaking news edition of On the Case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. A big update coming in from the Pima County Sheriff in Arizona related to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. We are seeing for the first time from law enforcement the two ransom notes that were sent to media outlets at the beginning of all of this when Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in the middle of the night, and also the sheriff raising some questions about when the videos were taken of that mysterious figure on Nancy Guthrie.
Scribed. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. That single sentence sits at the heart of the Pima County Sheriff's official press release, scribed, a document that reads less like a routine case update and more like an indictment of a fractured federal partnership. Picture a relay race where one runner drops the baton, scribed, then blames the anchor for a slow finish. That image defines everything unfolding between Sheriff Nanos and FBI Director Kash Patel right now, scribed. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Gavel file. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
On different nights. There's a lot to break down. This is really the first time in a while we have received information directly from the Pima County Sheriff. Joining me now to help talk about all of this, Anjanette Levy, host of Crime Fix here on Law and Crime. Anjanette, thanks for doing this. I know you've been following this case as well. Before we get into the ransom notes, what do you make of the timing of all of this to release this information today? There was the report that came out that some DNA of a hair fiber didn't really turn anything up. Right. And then a couple hours later, you have this pretty large press release coming in about the ransom notes and then also information potentially about the person at the front steps.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I think the timing is intentional. I think that this could mean a couple of things. It could mean that they really are at their wits' end and they have no choice or feel they have no choice but to release this information, hoping that somebody will see these notes and possibly maybe recognize the writing, or possibly this is intentional because they're trying to see how a potential suspect might react. And so there are a couple of possibilities here. The fact that they're saying that hair, that nothing came of the DNA on the hair, very interesting to me, very interesting, because it sounded like they were hanging their hopes on that DNA testing that was going on with that hair, the rootless hair. And it sounds like nothing came of it. So I think that they are going to talk only when they feel like it's beneficial to the investigation, because Sheriff Nanos has only spoken a few times to certain local media outlets. He hasn't really done a lot of big national.
Scribed. The timeline is the first witness. Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Tucson home on the night of January 31st. According to Director Patel's own public statements, scribed, the FBI was not formally invited to assist until 4 days later. 4 days. That is not a gap in communication. That is a chasm.
He has been involved in this, but I think there may have been some missteps in the very beginning. Sheriff Nanos said they called the FBI, but Kash Patel, there's been a war of words between the two. He says they weren't brought in until 4 days later and that their precious time was lost. It's amazing to me that maybe there hasn't been more progress made toward an arrest, but also, Chris, we just don't know. Right. We don't know if they've got their eyes on a couple of people or if they're simply just desperate at this point in time.
Right. And it certainly give a benefit to the doubt as they're continuing to work. You have this sheriff, Nanos in Pima County. He's been at the end of a lot of criticism. Yes. There's been a lot of reporting about potential tension between the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office and questions about whether they're step by step. I know there's a task force. Just what do you make at this point? Because you look at this and you wonder, is the FBI, they're the ones who are really kind of handling the video part of it and trying to track down where this Bitcoin wallet's located. How involved is the Pima County Sheriff actually when it comes to some of the digital forensics in this case, the digital evidence of the ransom note and where that may have come from, where these videos came from in the days. Just what do you take of it being the sheriff's office being the one putting this in?
Scribed. The sheriff's office maintains they made the call immediately, but the federal record tells a different story, scribed. And sitting in the gap between those two accounts is an evidentiary crime scene that went unprocessed by federal forensic teams for nearly 96 hours, scribed. We never intended to hurt her. That is the second ransom note, released directly by the sheriff's office on the 6-month anniversary of the disappearance, scribed. And make no mistake, it is an explosive document. The first note was a cold, transactional Bitcoin demand with specific dollar amounts, deadlines, and a direct threat of execution.
We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days. You will need to send Bitcoin in the amount of 4 million USD before 5 p.m. on Thursday the 5th. If payment is not received, the ransom will be increased to 6 million USD, which will need to be paid by 5 p.m. on Monday the 9th. Once payment is received to the Bitcoin address below, she will be released within 12 hours of deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. If payment is not received by the last deadline on Monday the 9th at 5 p.m., she will be killed. Your mother is aware of this, and her life is in your hands. It is in the best interest of everyone to have this completed as soon as possible. You will not be able to contact me from here on out. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. And then at the bottom, it's written as she had a white smartwatch on the floor of her bed and white floodlight in the backyard.
Scribed. The second note reads like a confession wrapped in an apology, claiming the victim perished accidentally from a heart condition and is now buried in nature.
Note. And it starts very differently. And the tone of this is noticeably different from that first one. It's much shorter as well. Guthrie family, we did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical condition. We never intended to hurt her. That was not our intention. She perished shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is buried in nature now. Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome. We want your family to know this and hope you all can find peace. We are truly sorry. Right off the bat, I mean, just even addressing the Guthrie family, where the first note was Savannah, and now it's the entire family. And we know that she had like heart issues, and that was a concern. She had health problems, but very different tone in the way of this, saying that they didn't want to hurt her when that is so different from what they said, if this is the same writer in that first letter.
Yeah, it's a very different tone. And I don't know many, I don't think I've ever seen a kidnapping case, and we don't see that many kidnapping for ransom cases. They seem pretty rare, where somebody would say, oh, we didn't mean to do this. We didn't mean to hurt her. Well, you've already threatened to kill her in the first note. You already said you would do that if you didn't get the Bitcoin. And so it's a much different.
Scribed. The tonal whiplash between these two communications is the evidentiary equivalent of two different fingerprints on the same weapon. Scribed. The sheriff's own forensic linguists noted distinctive patterns of word choice, syntax, and phraseology that suggest multiple authors.
Does that?
No, and it's, and I should have pointed this out before. So the first letter was February 2nd, and the second letter came on February 6th. So you have a 4-day difference. And then it's just the motive of you're speaking directly to the Guthrie family, yet you're sending it to KOLD television and TMZ. Right. It's just a very bizarre collection of media outlets to send it to, especially if you're trying to now like comfort a family, but then still put it out in the public like that. If this is all real, and police aren't confirming it, they're saying it's May. I think the fact that they're putting it out to the public, they do write this in the press release. This is from the sheriff. They say, these communications reveal distinctive patterns of word choice, syntax, and phraseology that reflect the writer's unique linguistic style. Mm-hmm. They also provide valuable.
The question no one in the press briefing dared to ask is this: if the FBI had been fully embedded from hour one, would those 4 critical days have been enough to trace the Bitcoin wallet before it went dark? We never intended to hurt her. Those words hang in the air because they imply a motive completely absent from the first note. The first note wanted money. The second note wanted absolution. Legitimate kidnapping for ransom operations do not pivot from extortion to pastoral grief counseling in 4 days. The sheriff knows this. The FBI knows this. And the tension between those two agencies is no longer background noise. It is the foreground of the investigation. Director Patel publicly criticized the local response time, suggesting precious hours were lost. Sheriff Nanos responded by releasing investigative material directly to the public, a move that by its very nature signals that the local lead agency feels the federal support apparatus is either too slow, too leaky, or too compromised to trust with sensitive evidence. Then comes the surveillance video. 2 clips recovered from a Ring doorbell camera that may have been recorded on 2 separate nights. The sheriff's office now confirms the masked figure seen on Nancy Guthrie's front steps did not stumble onto that porch by accident. He cased the property. He studied the lighting. He knew the camera was there and he came anyway.
Right now are the videos and the images initially released by Kash Patel, the FBI director, of that person in a mask, seemingly armed, on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. And people may remember that this was video they said had to be extracted from, because Ring, if you don't pay for a particular service, it doesn't get saved to the cloud. It had to be extracted. So there wasn't a lot of information surrounding like when this video was taken. You know, we know from times of when it was, turned off, but in terms of when that video and this person was actually on her front steps, like that wasn't clear. But now they're saying, quote, 2 videos recovered from Nancy's doorbell camera may be from 2 separate days. These videos are critical to our understanding of the unidentified male's behaviors and choices. They indicate he took steps to prepare for the event on the night of January 31st to February 1st, which is so chilling to think about this not being, because there's that theory out there of maybe they just hit a house, it was a burglary, and they didn't know that Nancy was going to be there. If this actually happened on 2 separate nights where they get this video, it shows that maybe there was more planning than some people thought when it came to targeting, and we don't know particular.
This was stalking converted into action.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of planning that actually went into this. That's my feeling. Just the fact that you would go there prior to the crime to case the place and see what you're going to be up against. I find that to be really interesting. And, there had been some reporting, as you said earlier, sourced reporting earlier in this case, talking about how the fact that there were people involved in the investigation that believed these notes were sent on, or that the videos rather were from different dates. So I think it's chilling, of course, as you say. The person, porch guy, that we've seen already on the videos, and we see that up close picture of him, the video, and the mustache through the mask. That's a cold operator, as far as I'm concerned. It does not seem, frazzled at all. The plants, reaching for the plants is obviously a very strange part of this, and makes no sense to me. But, it screams to me premeditation and pre-planning. And so I don't think this was just happenstance. And again, it could be covering up for a murder. We just don't know yet.
We never intended to hurt her. That phrase echoes for a 3rd time because it is the evidentiary fracture point. If the victim was targeted, the second note is a cover story.
Yeah, they may have some validity. I've always wondered if these notes were a cover to buy time to cover up a homicide. I don't know that, but it's always been a thought of mine. Obviously, they're releasing these right now for a reason. They didn't do it before then, or before this time, rather. The 6-month anniversary of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is here. It's upon us. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are some interesting things in this note, how they're saying, don't call the cops. They're not going to help. They cannot help you. They are very adamant and certain of this. The cops had already been called. The cops had already been called by the time these notes were sent. These were sent to local TV stations and to TMZ. The cops were already aware.
Right.
That's how the cops got these notes. So I find that to be very curious. And that's why it makes me wonder, are these simply a cover and a reason and in a way, or an attempt to buy time to cover up a murder? That is a thought.
If the victim was not targeted, the first note is performance art. Both cannot be true. And here is what keeps investigators awake at night. At what point does a botched kidnapping become a federal cover-up case? Because the moment the ransom demand pivoted to a claim of accidental death, this stopped being a standard missing persons investigation and became something much darker. The 6-month mark has now passed with no arrest, no recovered remains, and a task force that, according to multiple reports, has seen its lead detective quietly replaced. The sheriff's office has now published a behavioral checklist for the public, asking citizens to report anyone who changed their appearance, missed work, cleaned a vehicle unexpectedly, or displayed sudden intense interest in the investigation. It is a standard investigative tool, but the fact that it is being deployed 6 months in suggests the trail has not gone cold. It suggests the trail has narrowed to a specific profile, and investigators are now squeezing the periphery to force movement.
Change in the way that somebody acts, that could be a red flag, that maybe they had something to do with this. So I'm just going to read these off. They say a change in mood or displays of anxiety, nervousness, or irritability, a change of physical appearance, hair color or cut, growth or removal of facial hair, etc., unexplained injuries, cuts on hands, bruises, etc. During the period Nancy was last seen, normal routine changes like missing work, classes, appointments, sudden departures from the area around the time of her disappearance, vehicle cleaning or repairs, unexplained interest or disinterest in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, noticeable intense interest or disinterest in the investigation, or an unexplained knowledge of the situation, which you read that and there's a lot of it is kind of like, we've seen that in stories before of like what people should be looking for. I just wonder, realizing right now, as I say, it's like, this is 6 months since she went missing. Like where was this maybe back 6 months ago? Like, why now making this call out to the public? Because they put out the videos and then kind of the news conferences stopped. And then now 6 months later, you just worry that they're really in this place where they're just hoping the phone call comes in with the tip that cracks this case.
And that could be their hope. I mean, this could be a sign of desperation. It really could. The 6-month anniversary is here. They know there will be media coverage. It's been 6 months, and maybe they just don't have any strong leads. So they just say, we're just going to drop it out there and see what happens.
Now ask yourself the question that reframes this entire story as a thriller rather than a bureaucratic headline. If you were holding evidence that could expose a failure at the highest level of federal law enforcement, who would you trust to release it? The sheriff just answered that question. He released the notes himself. He released the video timeline himself. He is no longer waiting for Washington to give him permission to speak. And that shift from cooperation to unilateral transparency tells you everything the press release itself cannot say. The lead agency is drawing a line, and that line runs straight through the FBI field office.
Out today.
Well, they're the lead agency. The FBI is in a support position. The FBI has all of the expertise when it comes to the electronics and the resources to analyze all of those items, and the cell phone triangulation data and pinging towers, and the CAS team with the FBI. They have all of those resources, but the Pima County Sheriff is still the lead on this case. And so the FBI is simply assisting and offering resources. The task force, I was told personally that, the initial detective who was in charge of this has been replaced with a more seasoned investigator. That was a misstep in the beginning, and that they are working together. At least those task force members are working together collaboratively on trying to solve this. So while the FBI brings a lot of resources to the table and likely is analyzing all of this video and things of that nature, I mean, those things take time. It takes time. So the Pima County Sheriff is going to be, until there's a federal nexus with this case, the feds aren't going to take over and be the lead. The sheriff's office is still in the lead, and they are the ones still, the head of this investigation until we learn that maybe federal charges are going to be filed, because at this point, there's been no nexus to show that the FBI should be leading this investigation.
Go to the Pima County Sheriff's official website right now and pull the February 6 press release, Exhibit Number 2. Read the second ransom note yourself, every word of it, and tell us in the comments below whether you believe the same person wrote both notes, or whether the 4-day delay created exactly enough time for a second author to enter the story. If this investigation gave you a new angle you had not considered, like this video, share it with someone who tracks federal overreach, and subscribe to Beyond the Gavel file with notifications on. The evidence does not stop, and neither do we.